Hello, I'm now going to record Daf Mem Zayin. We are on top of Daf Mem Zayin Amid Aleph, Amar Reb Zeira, on the second line. The last thing we learned was that according to Rabbi Shimon, when a lamp is extinguished on Shabbos, you're allowed to be metaltal the lamp. The reason was because Rabbi Shimon was not concerned with muktzah machmas miyas, even if the lamp is a clay lamp and it's miyas, he's not concerned with muktzah machmas miyas. He also is not concerned with the fact that the lamp was lit ben hashmoshes before Shabbos. He doesn't hold that since it was muktzah ben hashmoshes, it's muktzah for all of Shabbos. In fact, he holds that the person who lit it was anticipating that it's going to go out, and if it goes out, if there's any oil left in the lamp, he wants to use it. Reb Shimon holds that's fine, and you can be metal to the lamp as well. However, the Gemara made an observation that while the lamp was burning, Reb Shimon would agree you're not allowed to be metal to it. It was not because you might come to extinguish it, because Reb Shimon holds davar she'en mischav and is mutter. The Gemara's conclusion was because the flame is called something which doesn't have any. It's not a chayfetz. The flame is not an object. And therefore, the flame on Shabbos itself is a davar muktzah, and the lamp, the oil, and the wick are all the buses to that flame. And therefore, Shimon agrees to that muktzah. So, since we were talking about buses, the Gemara starts out: Amar Reb Zeira, Amar Reb Asi, Amar Reb Yochanan, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Amar Rabbi Rumanus, Li hitter Rabbi letaltel machta be'efra. So, this is a long quote that Rabbi was matter to handle a machta. Machta was a pan that held coals and had incense spread over the coals. And l'chayra, what it's saying is that even though it all went out, and now you have a pan full of ash, Rebbe was matter to handle the pan full of ash. Now the question is, if the ash, l'chayra, I say it with a capital lamed, if the ash is a davar muktzah Shabbos, because it has no, you didn't plan on using the ash on Shabbos, so then the ash is a davar muktzah. So the pan is a basis to the ash, which is the davar muktzah. How did Rebbe allow that pan to be handled? Amalei Reb Zeira le Reb Asi. So Reb Zeira asked Reb Asi, who was in the middle of this quote, Miyam Reb Yochanan hachi. How could Reb Yochanan have repeated that in the name of Rebbe? But now there's a Mishnah later, Noitel Adam, Mishnah Daf Kuf Mem Aleph, Noitel Adam B'noi V'Evan B'Yado. A person can pick up a small child, even though the child has a stone in the child's hand. The Gemara later explains it's a child that's crying or missing his father very, very much. And if you don't pick up the child's going to get sick. So the Chachamim were matir to pick up the child, even though the child has a muktzah stone in his hand. And continue, Oy Kalkolo V'Evan B'Toicha. You're also allowed to pick up a basket when the basket has a rock in the basket. V'Amar Rabba Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. But Rabba Bar Chana said B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan B'Kalkola Malaya Peiris Eskina. It's because the basket has a lot of produce. Because it has produce, so therefore the produce is the ikar, and the rock is the not ikar. Therefore the basket is considered a basis to the produce. Tam, the reason why you can pick up the basket is this baperi, because it has produce in it. Halez baperi, but if it doesn't have produce, lo, you couldn't pick up the basket that's holding a rock. So how are you allowed to pick up this machta? How did Rebbe allow you to pick up the machta that's full of muktzah ash? Ishtaimim k'shoachada, so Rav Asi was stunned for a moment, didn't know. And then he said, Omar, you know what? Hochanami dis be kartin. It could be that on the pan, besides for the ash, there are cloves of incense. So maybe that's why you can pick up the pan, because it's a basis to the cloves of incense. Amar Abaye, so Abaye dismisses Rav Asi's answer, and he says, Kartin be Rebbe Michashivi. Rebbe was a very wealthy man. Would a few cloves of incense be worth anything in Rebbe's house, so that the pan is considered a basis to those cloves? V'chitem, and if you'll tell me chazul aniyim, but maybe for a poor person, those few cloves are valuable, and therefore the pan is considered a basis to those cloves. We learned in a brayso, big de aniyim, a piece of fabric that belongs to the poor, which, well, let's say it's 3 by 3 etzbois. We've had this a number of times before. It's basic 3 by 3 etzbois, very small, or it's made out of very coarse fabric. So la'aniyim, so for poor people, that's considered a piece of fabric which has value, and it's makabel tumah. Big de ashirim or la'ashirim. If you have a beggar that's bigger, a piece of fabric that's 3 by 3 tfachim, and it's made of a finer cloth, so that's makabel tumah in the house of an aisher as well. And certainly an ani would consider that a valuable piece of cloth, which could be makabel tumah. Aval daniyim la'ashirim loy. But we would imply that, let's say, a 3 by 3 etzbois piece of fabric, or coarse piece of fabric, would not be makabel tumah when it's in the possession of an ashir. So what's the moral of the story? That the value of an object really depends as to who's owning it. So a small piece of cloth might be valuable if an ani owns it, but not if an usher owns it. So here too, these few grains of incense, even though they might be valuable to a poor person, are not valuable to the wealthy Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So once again, why did he allow one to handle that pan full of muktzah ash? So Abaye takes a try and he says, Elam Rabbi. Abaye says, well, midi dahavi agraf shel rei. If there's a container that has waste in it, so it's disgusting, so you're also allowed to take it out of the house or take it away because it's disgusting. So maybe Rebbe allowed you to move this pan of ash because it was disgusting. Amar Rava, so Rava dismisses Abaye's answer. He says, Shtei shuvas b'dover. I have two explanations, two answers, two responses why this pan of ash is not similar to a container of waste. Graf shel rei mois, a container of waste is really disgusting. So the Chachamim allowed you to pick it up and remove it. The high loy mois, ash is not that disgusting. And furthermore, graf shel rei migali. A container of waste is usually an open container, and that's why it's awful. But v'hai mikasi, but this pan of ash usually had a cover. So it's only ash, it's not waste, and it has a cover, it's not exposed. So I still don't understand why Rebbe allowed that pan of ash to be moved. So the Gemara takes the kasha and turns it upside down. Elam Rava. So Rava says, we've been struggling to answer a kasha that never was a kasha in the first place. Ki avina be Rav Nachman, when we were in Rav Nachman's yeshiva, have a metaltalina and kanuna. We handled a kanuna. A kanuna is called a brazier, a brazier, which is a container that has coals, and the coals create heat, and there's a cover on top, but the heat goes through the holes and it warms up a room. So we used to be metaltal, this kanuna, this container of coals, agav kitma, because of the ash inside. Because of the ash inside. That means the ash is not muktzah Shabbos. Ash is useful. Ash can be used to cover saliva on the floor. Ash can be used to cover dirt on the floor. Ash was a usable object. So consequently, the ash not only is a cause for muktzah, au contraire, the ash is a cause for not being muktzah. In fact, afagav dikale shivre eitzim, if the kanuna had broken pieces of wood, and the pieces of wood might be muktzah, you were able to be metaltal the kanuna, this container, because of the ash. So all of a sudden, upside down, when Rebbe was matir to handle the machta be'afra, it doesn't mean Rebbe was matir to handle the machta in spite of the ash that it had. Au contraire, Rebbe was matir to handle the machta because of the ash that it had. The ash was a dover that was not muktzah. We were struggling for nothing. Meisive, the Gemara Sakasha, Veshavin, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon both agree. Shem yeshba shivrei psila shasir l'taltal. One more kasha. Rabbi Shimon allowed you to handle a nair, a lamp that had gone out. But Rabbi Shimon agrees with Rabbi Yehuda that if in the lamp there are pieces of wick, then it's also to be metaltal lamp, because the lamp is a basis to the pieces of wick that are muktzah. A wick on Shabbos is muktzah. But isn't there oil also in the lamp? So if there's oil in the lamp, why can't you handle the lamp because of the oil in spite of the wick? The same way that here you can handle the kanuna because of the ash in spite of the pieces of wood. Amar Abaye said, Begalila Shanu, that this halacha that you can't handle a lamp because it has pieces of wick in it is in the Galil. In the Galil, they were far away from linen, so linen wicks were very valuable. In the Galil, there were a lot of olives, so oil was very cheap. So therefore, if you had this lamp that was holding pieces of wick and oil, the lamp was considered a basis to the wick, which was expensive, rather than a basis to the oil, which is cheaper. And so therefore, it was a basis l'davar aser. But this whole sugya that we did here for almost an amid was virtually irrelevant. That the Rebbe was matir to handle a machta full of ash because you can handle a machta full of ash. because the ash is not muktzah, which we thought. It's non-muktzah, because it can be used on Shabbos in order to cover dirt or blood or anything on the floor, saliva. So now we start another sugya. Why are we starting this other sugya? It was mentioned before that if you had a candelabra made of pieces, you are not allowed to be metaltal it on Shabbos, because if it comes apart, we're afraid that you may put it together again, and putting it together again would be a malacha of maka b'patish, the final hammer blow, which completes the construction of an object. We also learned that, just chazering for a minute, that what happens if you have a large candelabra that is not made of pieces, but it has grooves. So because of the grooves, it has a similarity. It looks like it's made of pieces, so that's also prohibited midrabanan. But if you have a smaller candelabra that has grooves, Rish Lakish was mekel and said you can handle it because it doesn't have pieces and doesn't look like a menorah that would normally have pieces. And Rabbi Yochanan was machmer. Okay, that's just chazara. But basically, we're going to talk about putting pieces together on Shabbos. Levi bar Shmuel, Ashkechinu leRabbi Abba uLeRav Huna bar Chia. He met these two Amoraim. The Avukaimi apischa de Rav Huna. We're standing at the entrance of Rav Huna's house, Rav Huna's base medrash. Amar Lu, and he asked them, Ma'u lahachzir mita shel tarsiyim b'Shabbos. If you have a bed which the coppersmiths used, which was made of pieces, it was assembled and disassembled, are you allowed to assemble it on Shabbos? Amrullah, they said, shaper dummy. It's perfectly okay to assemble it, no problem. Also, l'kamid Rav Yehuda, when Levi bar Shmuel came to Rav Yehuda, Amar, he said, Rav Shmuel, Damri Tarvayu, Rav Shmuel both hold, Hamachzir mita shel tarsiyim b'Shabbos chayav chatas. If you assemble this bed of the coppersmiths, if you assemble the parts on Shabbos, you're chayv deraisa. So we have a dispute here from one end to the other. Rav Shmuel says it's an isur deraisa. Rabbi Abba and Rav Huna bar Chia said it was totally mutter. So Meisvei, the Gemara responds with a kasha. How can they have said that it's mutter? We have a brisa. First case. Hamachzir konem menorah b'Shabbos chayav chatas. If you have a candelabra and you screw or push in the shaft of one of the parts of the candelabra back in, you're chayav chatas. It's an isur deraisa. Knei sayodin lo yachzir v'mhechzir poter avaloser. Let's say the plasterers used to have like a wooden block that had a rag on it that had plaster, and then they used to have a handle, and the handle depended if they had to reach very far, so they had extensions to the handle. If they didn't have to reach very far, they didn't use the extensions. So putting in the extensions of the handle of a plasterer, so you're not allowed to do it, and if you do it, it's an isur derabanan. So that's only an isur derabanan. Why? Because these handles of the plasterers were meant to be extended in and out. So really, it's not really an isur, but the derabanan they answered it. Reb Simoy continues to say, Keren agula chayiv, Keren pshuta poter. I have to explain what it's talking about. This musical instrument, if it's a rounded musical instrument, so the way it worked is on the sides of the center of this instrument that had holes, and into the holes you used to put reeds, tubes, and then you blew through the center of the instrument, and you moved your fingers on the tubes, and that's how it made music. So if it's a rounded instrument, then putting the tubes in is a more permanent type of attachment, and there you're chayav achatas, and isur deraisa as you complete this instrument. But a keren pshuta, a straight instrument that also has these tubes that go into the holes, there it's poter avaloser. Why? Because it's meant to go in and out. The straight instrument, the tubes are meant to go in and out, and the rounded one is more permanent. But bottom line, it's either your chayav achatas or is an isur derabanan, but certainly it's not mutter, like these two Amoraim said, Rav Abba and Rav Huna bar Chia. The answer is inu da amur, because they held kihai tana, they held like a different tana. So we're going to learn a new brisa. The Tanya we learned in a brisa, malbanais hamita. Now a bed used to have wooden legs, and sometimes if the wooden legs were sitting in earth, we were afraid that the wooden legs might rot. So there were like sockets, like the Mishkan's boards had sockets. So you used to have like sockets to put the legs of the bed into, or used to fit them onto them. So the malbanais hamita, the sockets that go onto the feet of the bed, karais hamita, the actual legs of the bed that can be attached and disattached. Levachim shal skibas. Let me explain what that is. That's if you have a bow, so there's the arch of the bow, you shoot arrows. But on the wooden arch of the bow, they would attach pieces of wood, so you would lean your arrow on that piece of wood. Those pieces of wood that were attached to the arch of the bow to lean your arrow on as you're drawing your arrow were called levachim shel skibas. Lo yachzir v'michzir poter. You're not allowed to put them back on, and if you do, there's an isser derabanan. Aval osir, but it's osir. But v'lo yiska, but you're not allowed to nail it in. Because if you nail it in toka chayv chatas, nailing something in is off the charts. That for sure you chayv chatas. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, Haya rafui muter. He says that if the attachment is loose, then there's not even an iser derabanan. Which means we have three views here regarding attaching things. According to the first brisa, a menorah which is attached hard, attached firmly, is an iser deraisa. If you attach something not firmly, then there's an Isser D'Rabbanan, like the handle of a plasterer's tool. Same thing was on the rounded instrument where you attach something firmly, was a Chiyav Chatas. On the straight instrument where it was not attached so firmly, so it was an Isser D'Rabbanan. The Tanakama of the second Brisa also held that even if you attach something tightly, it's only an Isser D'Rabbanan. The only Isser D'Oraisa is only if you nail it in. But whether you attach something loosely or attach something tightly, it's only an Isser D'Rabbanan. Reb Shimon Gamliel held if you attach something tightly, it's an Isser D'Rabbanan. It's a Gzeira, you might nail it in. But if you attach something loosely, it's absolutely mutter. And that's what Reb Shimon Gamliel said, and that's what they held, that the Mita Shel Tarsiyim is something which is attached loosely, and therefore they held it was mutter. Bei Rav Chama have a mita galal nisa. At Rav Chama's house, there was this bed made of parts. Have a mahadri lubiyel matava, and on Yontif, they used to assemble it. Omer lehumi rabbanon l'Rava. So one of the rabbanon said to Rava, "My data, what's your opinion? Binyamin atzaru. You feel that that's not really, since you're not making it tight, so it's not really a malacha deraisa. It's like doing it to the shinui, not making it tight." But nidi isura deraisa leka, maybe you're not doing an isur deraisa by making it tight, but isura derabanan miyika, but at least an isur derabanan it should be. Amar lei, so Rav Chama responded, Anok Rav Shimon Gamliel severely. I hold like Rav Shimon Gamliel, that if you nail it, it's deraisa. If you make it hard, it's derabanan. But if the insert is not hard, but it's loose, then the amar im haya rafui muter, it's totally muter. So la locha, that's what it is. If you nail something in, there's an Isser D'Oraisa. If you tighten something tight, there's an Isser D'Rabbanan. It's a Gzeira that you might nail it in permanently. But if you put something in which is only loose, then it's Mutter L'Katchila. However, the Ramah adds that what happens, this very often can come up, and again, I'm not asking a shilas, when you have handles, let's say, on a cabinet, or you have a knob on the door of a stender, so sometimes it gets unscrewed and it's loose. So one would argue, if I just tighten it a little bit, so I'm not going to tighten it tight, so I won't have an Isser D'Oraisa. It's true, but since these are handles that are normally tightened very tight, so therefore anything that is normally tightened tight, it's also even to attach it loosely. So anyway, that's so it seems. It is interesting that we're talking about Makkah B'Patish. And there's a shaila about winding a watch. So some poskim said that if you have a watch that stopped, so to wind it would be Makkah B'Patish. So the Chayyim says. But others argued that since the winding of a watch is something that winds and gets unwound, it winds and gets unwound, so it's something which is really not meant for permanence, similar to legs of a bed which are made to tighten and untighten, and it's not really that tight because it only used to last, the winding used to last for a day, so therefore it's mutter. Pretty much most poskim answered winding a watch, but if the watch was going, so there they were matter to wind it on Shabbos. So I'm going to pause here, and then I'm going to upload the next shiur in a second time.